heard a lot of great talks that have been really exciting, is that there is a national ocean policy. I think a lot of the ocean people in this room are aware of this, but if some of you may not be, that we have an administration that's really taking a leadership role in ocean policy. And so that's just another really exciting opportunity that we have because it is on the national agenda. And we have people who really want to make something happen. So there are 9 strategic goals under this. They span a whole array of issues, but one in particular that I want to mention now, and I'm going to come back to at the end, is this idea of coastal and marine spatial planning. And I thought it was very interesting this morning hearing a lot about the patchwork on the land. We obviously also have a patchwork of uses in the ocean. The big difference, of course, is that the ocean is a public trust and that it's owned by all of us. It's not privately owned. And so we have this huge opportunity, I think, in working in the ocean to take care of those public trust resources. And we should be thinking, as you think about your vision process, about how we can do that. We heard a lot of the challenges about where programs are stretched. We just heard about those here, covering a huge amount of space with only a few people, this need for public engagement and support, but also this opportunity to reach the public through the power of place, through these special places. We just see these pictures and we know that if people saw these places, they would understand. And so it's our opportunity and challenge to reach the people and help them understand what's so special about these places. This is just one, and I just wanted to note that marine protected areas are a management tool, and they're used to protect biodiversity. They may be used for other things as well, but that's sort of the primary purpose of these protected areas. But we have a big communication challenge. We call them all kinds of things, and the public often doesn't understand, you know, what's a sanctuary, what's a reserve, what's a park, what can I do there? And so I think that's one thing that we have heard a lot of, and we really need to work on, is communicating that these are all protected areas, and they're protected for the health of the resource and for the enjoyment of the people. And that's what they're for. Our job at the National Marine Protected Areas Center is to create a national system of MPAs. And so obviously the question is, well, why do we need one? And I think the reason is because we do have so many programs and so many efforts going on to protect places in the coastal and ocean environment, but often we don't have any kind of systematic way of bringing people together. I think, again, from the speakers here, we heard about some of the partnerships that people have in the Florida Keys, in the Pacific, in Alaska, agencies working together, combining their resources, helping each other, working across those jurisdictional boundaries. We wanted to encourage that kind of partnership and help make it easier for people to do that. So that's the real purpose of the national system. And then I think the other complementary purpose is to look across the landscape, all the diverse ecosystems, and make sure that we're representing all the different kinds of habitats and having a truly representative system of MPAs in the United States. So Sylvia Earle talked about some of these issues, but I just wanted to touch on it briefly. About 40% of US waters are in some kind of protection, but that includes these huge fishery management areas that may only protect for a certain type of species or a certain type of gear. So it can be fairly limited. But no-take MPAs that are fully protected occupy only about 3% of US waters. So it really shows you the span of protection that we're talking about and how there is this huge opportunity to take advantage of planning efforts and the management tools that we have in place to do a good job on protection. And I would note that 95% of the no-take area in the US is at Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument. So that means that 5% of the fully protected areas are everywhere else. So our role at the MPA Center, as I mentioned, is to coordinate and support MPA programs. You'll notice that there's that aquatic animal, the buffalo there. This is a partnership between NOAA and the Department of Interior. For those of you who get into Washington logistics, the budget line comes to NOAA, and so the program is really located at NOAA, but we work extremely closely with the Department of Interior. Really couldn't have done this. It's been a decade now of this partnership, and we really couldn't have gotten here without the Department of Interior and the active engagement of folks, particularly at the Fish and Wildlife Service, where folks have really taken a leadership role. And I particularly wanted to recognize Andrew and Brett, who have really stepped up and made sure that Fish and Wildlife Service was in the front row in helping get this off the ground. So some of the work that we do, I'm going to touch on briefly is helping build regional networks of MPAs, providing data and tools, and supporting capacity building. Just wanted to highlight that we're all working on common issues. This is Cape Romaine. Sea level rise is an issue that's affecting a lot of different marine protected areas, regardless of what the ecosystem type is. We have folks who are concerned about common species that may move across boundaries of different marine protected areas. We have folks who care about the coast but maybe come from very different perspectives, don't necessarily talk to each other. And so what we were trying to do is look at three broad goals for the system. Natural heritage, which is biodiversity and ecosystem protection. Cultural heritage, which we just heard about in Alaska, archaeological remains, but also the living cultures, as we heard about in the Pacific. And sustainable production. So these are the three broad goals that we're trying to achieve, and then we have a bunch of management objectives under each of these goals, and we're looking at how existing MPAs in the United States help support these goals and objectives. Right now, the national system is formed of existing MPA programs that nominate themselves because they want to work together and be part of this partnership. And so we have 297 out of a total of 1,600 MPAs in the country that are members of the system, 11 state partners, and 106 national wildlife refuges. So national wildlife refuges by far are the largest partner, both in terms of acres and in terms of the number of sites that have participated in this program. And these are just some of the things that we've been focused on. Developing a common vision and strategy around how MPAs work with coastal and marine spatial planning, how we can better conserve and raise the profile of cultural heritage resources, engaging tribal and indigenous people, building resilience to climate change, and focusing on MPA science and monitoring. We do a lot of work in engaging stakeholders. We have an MPA Federal Advisory Committee made up of people who represent all the different sectors involved in the ocean, including some who have been very mistrustful of protected areas, like the fishing community, oil and gas, folks all across the spectrum. We're working right now with the Park Service and the refuge system to identify where do we have common needs in terms of training and how can we pool our resources and come up with some common curriculum that will serve all of the agencies. And we're doing some outreach through our website in terms of getting some videos out and the word out about marine protected areas. One of the things that we do is provide a national and regional picture about MPAs. I gave you some of those statistics, and you'll see that there's a handout about the national wildlife refuges within the MPA system that kind of provides a nice synthesis of what's happening with marine and coastal national wildlife refuges. We're also developing some online tools that are very helpful to managers and also to the general public in terms of you don't have to be a GIS expert to be able to go online, click on a dot on a map, and pull up all of the MPAs that are located in that area, and then learn about what the management responsibilities are and some of the resources there. We're now starting to add information on resources, thanks to the efforts of Brett and others, so that we are able to pull in and highlight through this online mapping process some of the information about resources. For example, national wildlife refuges with seabirds and nesting habitat. And I think as we add more information on resources, we'll really have a much richer resource that we can provide information and analysis on a geographic basis. So the last piece I just wanted to leave you with is getting back to this issue about ocean policy and coastal and marine spatial planning. You'll see the bride and groom underwater at Florida Keys. Some of the most unusual uses seem to happen there. But the idea behind this initiative is that the oceans have been like the Wild West. It was kind of whoever got there first with the biggest guns got the resource. And what we're trying to do is look at, is there a more rational, planned approach to looking at what areas are appropriate for different uses and how can we reduce the conflicts among different uses and also ensure that we're protecting the resource as we go out and use the ocean. Because we are getting more and more pressure for not only the traditional uses in the ocean, but also new ones like alternative energy, aquaculture, things that are really on the horizon. So This is one of the goals of the National Ocean Plan. There's a strategic plan that's being drafted, and the vision is for there to be 9 regional planning bodies around the country that will develop coastal and marine spatial plans that will outline how the ocean should be used in their region. And this is a huge opportunity to make sure that conservation is front and center and part of this process. We need to articulate why marine protected areas are important, what role they play, how they should be addressed with respect to other uses, and also to ensure that we keep our options open for future conservation efforts. So one of the things that we're doing to help inform this process is mapping how people use the ocean. This has been a big missing piece in terms of understanding what's going on in the ocean, is having spatial information on where these uses occur. Often there's good information on a few uses, but especially for non-consumptive uses like bird watching, scuba diving, just getting out and kayaking, canoeing, there's really not been good data. And so our office has developed a methodology to start mapping ocean uses. We've done the entire California coast. We're working with Washington. We've also done part of New England and part of Hawaii. And so this is something that we hope will really help inform management and also be a base data layer when we get into these discussions about coastal and marine spatial planning. And this is just an example of the online information that we can provide. And those are some of the non-consumptive uses that we've been mapping. So just briefly, we have an MPA fund. This is a small pot of money, but we've been using it to foster collaboration across MPA programs. Fish and Wildlife Service has had several projects funded through this process, and so we're really excited about it. We hope that we'll be able to continue as we get a little squeezed in keeping this seed money available to do these kinds of projects. I'm going to just flip quickly through those. And then I think in terms of opportunities for collaboration, we've talked about how we can kind of pool our resources and join our voices together to make sure that we're being heard on national ocean policy, on coastal and marine spatial planning, and on other national issues, fostering collaboration on other common issues like climate change adaptation, building tools, and international leadership, where we really have some opportunities, I think, to share with others how we're working on these issues in the U.S. and sharing that. We get a lot of interest from overseas, from other countries about marine management. Finally, I just wanted to close by echoing, I heard Greg Sakanik this morning talking about the landscape perspective, and he used all these words, and I got so excited when I heard it because it was exactly what we're talking about when we talk about marine networks. And so all I would say is, as you think about the vision statement, and you think about the landscape scale, and you think about the land ethic, just mentally put an ocean behind it, because I think it's all relevant, and it really will serve us well if we can kind of think of these things as a whole. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you to all our panelists. We have gone a little bit over, but unless somebody doesn't mind, can we take a few questions? So if somebody has a really great question for our panelists, please step to a microphone or shout out loud.
Unique experience, almost as much as diving off a World War II wreck in Beaufort Lagoon off of Arctic Refuge. Is it true that I suppose the most significant threat to the lagoons in Palmyra are the researchers doing the research in Palmyra? I've heard stories. I'm just asking about impacts from people on Palmyra. In this case, researchers.
There we go. The researchers that are going to Palmyra right now through PARC are all permitted through special use activities. And just from my perspective of being there last month, no, I don't see an impact from them at all. In particular for the lagoons are pretty affected from the military occupation there. But outside the lagoons, even on the reef flats, the research activity is minimal. And it is, we have an on-site refuge manager and assistant manager, so they are working hand in hand with the scientists that are going out there to ensure that the research is compatible as well.
That's a great question. I'm not sure I know. I think when I first got there in 2006, we were starting our comprehensive conservation plan, and I was forewarned by the planner that that would be the biggest issue, was that the industry would come after us under the CCP, and they never showed up, and they never commented or anything. So I'm not really clear, and maybe folks that were there before me would understand, but there's a lot of local support for the prohibition because people who live there locally and recreate in the backcountry don't want to be harassed any more than the birds do. So I think maybe, and that's true for the whole history of the sanctuary down there, is it's all turned around to people recognizing the advantages of protecting some of these areas. And the whole ocean side of the Keys is there's no restrictions. So that's the other thing, is we could always argue that there are other more appropriate places for that activity and leave these places that have been around for a long time closed to that activity. So.
So, please, one more.
There we go. Stan Hales, Director, Barnegat Bay National Estuary Program, now the Barnegat Bay Partnership. These are wonderful places. There are many other wonderful places, around the country in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service refuges and other protected areas. I'm a former service biologist myself and worked on some. But with the marine protected areas and other things, there are lots of challenges. I've heard little mention or discussion about challenges. I'd like to see more in the visions document to talk about addressing some of these challenges. For example, the average person in the country now, I think, lives in an urban or suburban area on the coast. We have tremendous water quality problems. We're an EPA-funded program. Budgets are tough at EPA these days. But I think one of the issues that has to be put on the table is addressing sort of the federal interagency coordination with all of these things. And I think I'd like to see some of that addressed in the document. So just my recommendation.
Okay, so we give enough time for the next workshop to come in here and get set up. I think we should go ahead and conclude for the day. Please thank our panelists again. And if you have any additional questions, be sure to find us later on this evening.